The problem with my psyche is that I'm like for years dealing with depression and like neglect and all that shit. It's like I always try to explain it like a like a bubble around my heart, like this. It's keeping away the pain, but it's also keeping away all the good stuff. And then the idea was that the narrator of this record, which is primarily me, but like a person that I think I am, or like a part of me. So you've fallen and everything is fucked. That was the end with Rats Gorge the Moon of all that has never been true. So what now? And I was like, okay, what now? So like I wrote this record about death and like, oh, everything's lost, everything is fucked. How about I do like a Jason Voorhees? Like I come back from the dead.
It's really good to see you again, dude. I feel like we haven't spoken in eons, and I know you took a bit of a break from the socials, and you didn't, or at least I wasn't around when you played in the UK last year. But how have you been?
Well, it's been very stressful, and you can still hear I'm still a bit. I had a cold, and it's not really gone away. It's been forever.
I thought that's just whiskey drinking to get those vocals good and ready for some of these clean vocal parts that you have on the new Ultha album.
Yeah, man. It's I mean, by the time this comes out, we'll be on tour, or the tour will have gone by. So I hope I'm okay for that one. But yeah, man, it's while the last weeks have been stressful and school is always stressful, but having a relationship now, and that is taking time, and well, school's always busy. But overall, I'd say I'm a lot better than the last time that we saw each other and spoke.
You're a pretty groovy guy the last time I saw you, so don't worry if you you never came across as badly. I still loved you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just like I was always, I had a therapist once, and she asked me like if you'd be a comic book figure, because she knows I'm heavily into comic books. Who would you be? And I'm like, I'll probably, like, from shooting from the hip, I would say Two-Face. And she's like, really? Like a good side and an evil side? It's like, nah. But like, on the one side, I work as a teacher in front of like 30 kids every lesson. I play concerts to a lot of people. I talk in podcasts. I could like go on stage and entertain 1,000 people with like stand-up shit or something. And on the other side, I just want to be alone at home. I want to read. I don't want to see anybody, and feel very like vulnerable in a way. And so like it's always been like this balance. And so like, of course, when I'm at the show, I mean, when I meet you, it was always a pleasure meeting you and your lovely wife and hanging out in the UK. And but then it's like the other side. It's like inside I felt really bad and terrible. I mean, that's where like most of the music comes from. But last year in summer, I like after we did that tour with Russian Circles, and it was clear that we would not play any shows, and we would like finish the recording, had the lineup change and all that stuff. I was like, okay, this cannot go on like this. If I enter the new school year like this, I'll be completely fucked. And so I looked for a new therapist, and I found one, and she's very good. And the first thing that she said is like, usually for people with depression, I tell them to go out, meet people, enjoy life, try to be part of everything. And she's like, no, you will do the opposite. You will pump the brakes really hard now. So we made a list of what's the stuff that is good for me. And it's like being outside in nature, seeing my best friend, hanging out with Titus, the dog, reading comic books, and listening to music. And that's what I did. So I texted a lot of people. It's like, hey, listen, I feel flattered that you want to hang out and do stuff with me, but I'm not, like, it's not possible for me right now. Because when I went out with people, it was okay. I had the feeling that I was performing like a sideshow, you know. And I went home and ate 2 bags of chips, drank a liter of cola, and ate some chocolate to decompress. And then I slept bad. Then I had to go to school, and I was fucked. And so it was like this vicious circle. And dude, I pumped the brakes, and I really took focus on what is good for me. Went to the gym more often, had better diets. And I mean, I'm vegan anyhow, but like less sugar, more vegetables and fruit and stuff and protein. And like my head completely changed after a while. And it was so well that like I actually fell in love with someone. And that was the first time, and I didn't think that it was possible anymore. And so yeah, like the story of this album that we're going to talk about is like the looking for the light in the dark times. And it is a story like from the first song to the last song. And it ended up being like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm doing a whole lot better now. Still not good, but a lot better.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, the road to recovery is one step at a time. You know, and this is, I often talk to people at work about this when we've got a problem we have to deal with, and I always say, just like pump the brakes. Don't get stressed about how to reach the summit of the mountain. Just think about, okay, what's the next action I need to take to get me one step further? And once you do that, I do find a lot of things, at least for me, that's how I generally approach most things. It all starts to become an awful lot easier, and particularly important, I think, a lot less stressful. You know, you stress about things you can't control, and when you're thinking about the summit of the mountain and all the carnage that could occur on the way to getting to the summit, that's when your mind starts to run away from you, without question.
It's funny that you said like this quote, because one of the starting points was that my best friend Danny and we ordered food, and we had Thai food or Chinese, I don't know, and there were like fortune cookies, and she gave me like, this one's for you, this for me. Like, I opened it and it said, stop worrying about things you cannot control. And I was like, that's the fucking deal. I always worry about things that I cannot control all the fucking time. So my head is like running rampant all the time. And I mean, let's face it, the world has gotten increasingly more stupid in the last years. It's, I don't want to like throw the toxic tantrum, but like, I'm really disappointed by humanity. And like, that's why I started keeping away from social media. I read the news sometimes, but like in general, it's like my safe space, if you want to call it that, was my balcony and my comic books. So, you know, it's like also wrestling. It's like these two things were like pretty like straightforward. It's like good versus evil, and the good guys will win in the end. And that kind of like saved me, just being outside, not talking to people, and especially like no scene chatter, no this guy did that, this person got canceled, this guy did that. And I mean, it's always like guys. And I mean, I had the same thing in school. Like the parents became increasingly more stupid. And I was like, what the fuck do you want from me? Like, I'm doing a good job. And there's not a lot of things where I consider myself being good at, but I know I'm a good teacher. And then it's like, I've been doing this shit for 15 years. And now in the last 3 years, all of a sudden, all I do seems to be wrong. And it's like, and you know, like they don't talk to you anymore. They use social media to like write like rants, or they go like to me, like my boss is my principal, and then like above him is like the government of Cologne, and so people like wrote to them. It's like, hey, there's this guy working at this school, and he's doing this or that, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And it's like where it's like, okay, like, you know, everybody fuck off, like I'm out of here. And I mean, I'm still doing my job, I'm still like voicing my opinion, even though as a tenured of the state in Germany you shouldn't. But I'm like, if they want to throw me out for calling someone a fascist pig, like, well, kick me out, I don't care. Yeah, so like that was the only way to go to get better. And it's like you said, it's one step at a time, and it took me half a year to actually feel something again and get better. And I mean, right now I'm in a very stressful place, but like you know, like the core, the essence, I feel a lot stronger than I felt last year at this time.
Yeah. I don't know whether I've ever spoken to you about this, but the one thing that I find to be absolutely rejuvenating, and it, to a point where if I don't have it, it really is an issue for me in the preceding year. But that 4-week holiday that I typically take to South Africa at the end of the year, where my house is, there's basically no internet, because we live up against the house is up against a mountain, so there is just about no cell phone signal, there's no internet signal, there's no TV. So for 4 weeks, for the most part, I'm completely cut off from the world. I'll log onto the internet sometimes, and I'll might post a picture on Instagram when I'm at a restaurant or something like that. But just that amount of disconnect and that unplugging, spending hours in the ocean, just spending a couple of hours reading, or spending a couple of hours, sitting with my wife, barbecuing, having a glass of wine, just talking shit, not having our heads in the screen. The healing qualities that come with that experience, I couldn't possibly, particularly in this day and age, I could not possibly recommend it to people more highly. Your life will completely change. But I'm interested as you say this, because as you kind of relating this experience to me, because if we pivot into the record, I mean, firstly, this is the most wildly creative thing. I was listening to it again today, and I was taking notes of every song, like just my not necessarily the lyrics as such as the story the music was telling me. And I got to the end of the record, and I sat thinking to myself, like, I wonder whether Ralph realizes just what a monumental piece of work this has actually turned out to be. I remember you saying to me, like, this isn't entirely not what I had planned the next album to sound like. But as you're talking about this journey that you're on personally, at what point during that journey did the creative process for this new record begin?
It's started 2 years ago. It is, we were like, except for the pandemic thing, usually we had like a full length out every other year. So then the EPs and stuff. But then we had this break, and that's when we did All That Has Never Been True. And we were like at the phase where we're like, okay, we never expected this last record to blow up the way it did. Like, it is, like for years, people were just like, yeah, Inextricable Wandering's fine, Belong's cool, but Converging Sins, man, that's the album. And we're like, okay, fine. And to me, like, All That Has Never Been True was like, I need to prove to myself that I can do better than Inextricable Wandering, because I was so broken at that time. I mean, we spoke about it on the last podcast that we did. So then we did that album, and it completely like blew our heads off, like how much people respond to this. And I mean, look at it, like last year, a band like Russian Circles asked us to go out on the road with them. It was like, out of the gazillion bands that would like kill to tour with them, out on a record that has been out like 3.5 years by that point. So we were like, at one point we were like playing shows, and we're like, hey, I think we really need to start doing something. And I mean, it boils down to me starting to write stuff, because the basic ideas and like concepts are always my stuff. And I had no idea. So I wrote one song that ended up being Love As We're Falling Down. So the actual opener of the album. Yeah. Which is like the most classic Ultha track, if you want to call it that. And by that time, we said that Andy, our then keyboard player, and who runs Goblin Sound Studio, where we always record and we also rehearse, we said like, hey, let's start writing stuff. And we did that song, like not in the form it is now, but like the basic idea of that song. And I was like thinking about like, what do I actually want to do? And then it took me a while to actually realize what I wanted to do. And then I had an idea, and I presented it to Andy, or like to the band. And then Andy said like, I don't want to play keyboards anymore. And I was like, what? Yeah, like I don't feel it. I'm done with keyboards. I'm like, oh, because my plan, and that's like what you just said, like my initial idea was that this album would be Johan Johansson and Tangerine Dream with blast beats. So adding more keys, having the guitars sound like keyboards as well, and like more spacey in a way. And so then we had this thing with Andy, and we were like, what are we going to do? And it's like, so what's your idea? It's like, yeah, I want to play a third guitar. And I was already like, oh, 4 guys with guitars on stage. I mean, it worked with Devil's Blood, but they had the female singer, and I was like, there's not a lot of bands that can pull this off and make it look cool and sound good. Also, I thought like the keyboards are so essential to our sound of what we do. So we tried it out. We weren't happy. He wasn't happy with the stuff that we did. We were not happy. And then he tried to emulate the keyboard with the guitar. This didn't pan out. And at some point we were like, I think this is not working. And then we had a talk, and he's like, okay, then I guess I'm out of the band. And we agreed as much as this pained us. It made us feel pain. Yeah, whatever. And then we're like, okay, now what? And like we broke up like adults, and I mean, he's still friends, and he played on the album, he recorded it, and it's fantastic. And then we got Tim in the band of Unruh, who's been a brother for years. But basically what happened was we wrote a lot of ideas with Andy, with 3 guitars. And by that point, we were like, if we start again from scratch, this will be another 2 years. And also we liked a lot of the ideas that we did, just not with 3 guitars. So I was like, okay, let's peel back what is here. And then I sat down, listened to the songs, found out what pieces I liked, what people like, what riffs the others liked. And then I started rearranging all that stuff into the fragments of the songs that are there now. And they were like in the basic structure, it was before we like actually entered Tim into the fold and worked on it, we had Love As We're Falling Down, Her Still Singing Limbs, Pink Soil Turning to Copper, the part the Abelia Springs, and I don't know, like the Cherry Nuts. And then we're like, this is already like a good amount of music. So I reconstructed these songs, we worked them out, and then by like accidents happened, and that's where Hex Upon Our Heads came from. And we're like, okay, we're onto something. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to get my soundtrack album that I wanted to do, but how about writing a movie without pictures? And that's what we had it for. And that's then I had the idea, was like, okay, now I know what I want to do. Here's the narrative. Like I knew what subject the record's going to be about, but then I had like in mind, okay, this will be this, the lyrics matched this, and then the usual process started. And then it took me like 2 months to write the whole rest of the album. Yeah.
It's interesting how quickly it kind of came once you had that, you almost kind of found your lane, and then everything started coming after that. Just a feather in your cap, by the way. The other day on the Weekly News Rant, somebody asked me what my favorite albums were of the decade so far. All That Has Never Been True was in that list. Standing alongside giants like who else was on that list? Mayhem, Acclaimed. So Ultha standing tall amongst the very best of the best. But I want to ask you actually, just before we get into the new album properly, does having the amount of recognition that you got for All That Has Never Been True, did that, because the way you're talking, that's kind of the first time I think you've experienced that degree of adulation for something that you've done as an artist. And I mean, I said to you when I saw you guys play at Reaperfest, I was one of the most emotional connections I've had to a black metal show in many years. I'm talking about seeing hundreds of bands play live, but seeing that, it was just utterly unbelievable. But does having that amount of recognition bring with it a lot of pressure for you as a musician, as a songwriter?
No, but that's mostly because that's the way I'm wired, that I always over-criticize myself. And, like, I don't believe a lot of times when people tell me this, like, I remember you telling me this, and I was like so flattered because I you know, like it tests a lot of taste and knowledge in you. And I was like, wow, okay. And yeah, I heard the episode when you talked about it. I was like, wow, this is mind blowing. And a lot of people came up to me, and it's like, I mean, like I said before, there's people that have like our artwork tattooed, like the heads of the cover of All That's Never Been True. Lyrics people write to me, and it's like, that's the way that I was when I wrote letters to Justin Sullivan of New Model Army. But the problem with my psyche is that I'm like, for years dealing with depression and like neglect and all that shit. It's like I always try to explain it like a, you know, like a bubble around my heart, like this, you know, it's keeping away the pain, but it's also keeping away all the good stuff. That's why I was always like, yep, okay, cool. And like when kids in school come up to me, it's like, oh, you're the best, thank you so much. I'm like, yep. And so like a lot of times I have a hard time believing that. But I remember, I don't know, do you know Mark of who's in Winter Filth now? Mark Deeks?
Yeah.
He was at that show, and like he represented like an Ultha shirt in a TV production where he it was like a documentary about the part of the UK where it comes from, and he's like, someone sent it to me, and I like established contact. And it's like, yeah, I wanted to support my favorite black metal band from now. I'm like, really? Us? And then he was at that show, and he came up to me teary-eyed after the show and just hugged me, like, you know, like super intense. I'm like, oh man, like, did you like it? Oh man, I loved it. I have no idea about the words that you're singing, but it's just the music and the way it's being played completely took me. Then he explained to me why. I don't want to go into that, but like Ultha is like, it became this like phenomenon in a way, like because we're so much adjacent to a scene and so much not part of it, that a lot of people tell us we're a black metal band for non-black metal fans. And this I always took as a compliment, but I was always happy that, like, you know, like real black metal legends were like, oh, I fucking love Ultha. And this to me is surreal. And when people like Russian Circles, and they explained to me how they found us, and it was just, to me, it was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Because to me, it's a thing that I do besides school, and I do it because I need to stay sane, and it's the only vehicle I have to stay sane. So it will always be super emotional. And then when it resonates so much with people and they share it, like, it's insane. It keeps me grounded, because I'm like, I feel very blessed that it is that way, that after all the years of playing in bands, I finally got a band that really gets recognition. And I don't need the rub, you know, but like I love that we get the chances, you know, like when Gary asked us to play Reaper, flew us into Fortress, and he's like, I'm going to book a tour for you guys in the UK. And all of us had like horrible tours in the UK before with our old bands. And we're all like, oh, really? And then he's like, no, we're going to play with Anti-Inferno, and I'm going to book that tour. And we're like, I mean, this all sounds like at least it won't be a clusterfuck. But it turned out to be one of the best tours we ever did. And all the people that came, and I mean, we're not talking about hundreds of people, but we talk about like decent amount and sold out shows and people going crazy. And that's cool. And I love that we get to do this. And that's the only form of success I want. And I just hope like the new album doesn't disappoint a lot of people. And I'm still going to write this music because I primarily do it for myself.
Well, if I take the band whose T-shirt I'm wearing right now, Paradise Lost, I've always said the great thing about them is that, with the exception of the album prior to Ascension, they've always written what they've felt creatively inspired to do. And so that is why I can love Gothic as much as I love Shades of God, as much as I love Draconian Times, as much as I love Host. Because no matter how different those records are, it's an honest and it's an authentic expression of how they were feeling as artists at the time. And sometimes artists are going to do something that is genuinely authentic to them, but I'm going to think it sucks. But in this instance, I think you've done something that is, it's two things simultaneously. It's a it's almost in some ways a celebration. This is my interpretation of the record. It's almost a celebration of Ultha's past. It's a solidifying of the present, and it's a look to the future, and it's all happening simultaneously across most of the songs. There's so much of your personality and having to, gotten to know you as I do, there's so much of your personality that I hear in this record, much more than I've heard on anything else that you've ever done. And again, I kind of sometimes have to check myself and go, like, is it the reason I like these songs so much because I know Ralph and I can kind of hear his voice in these records? But I think objectively that is not the case. I mean, this is just legitimately great music. If we start at the top and we start going through these tracks, so the Unseen World for me sets the tone early on that this is going to be a very different record. There's post-punk influences, which I know you love. That's immediately noticeable, especially in that kind of bass line that sort of just repeats itself. Your cinematic flair is very evident as well. I think the first time you and I ever spoke, we were talking about that, like these touches of cinema and of film scores that you bring into the band, and you do it in a way that I've never heard in, not just in black metal, but in any kind of music, any style of music outside of movie scores themselves. But it's a perfect way to set up the record and kind of set your stall out, and then you sort of throw the first curveball, which is Love As We're Falling Down, and as you described it earlier, that's about as close to a typical Ultha song as you can get. But then it's got this really jacked up, testosterone laden sequence that starts at around the 4-minute mark. It's got this fucking cool rolling groove tempo, double track vocals. It's like, it's a properly aggressive Ultha song. These incredible keyboards that come in at the 5-minute mark that just really takes the song to the next level. What a way to open the album.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, let me wind back to what you just said. I mean, speaking like that band Paradise Lost, like you and I share a love for this band. And when we started rearranging these songs to what it is now, there were ideas of like, hey, let's do a record without blast beats. Let's take a lot of the stuff. I have a completely written Second Robes of Night album, which will never come to be. But like, let's take fragments of that and like, let's do a like more post-punkish record. And I like the idea, but I don't want to fall flat on my ass with something that is so off that people won't like it. And I remember when the quote unquote indie albums by Paradise Lost came out, I was the only guy in my surrounding that were like, this is fucking awesome. And everybody was like, oh, that's shit, it's gay, whatever. I'm like, yeah, fuck off. And it's like, to me, like we spoke about this before, I was always a metal fan, but I was never like a metal head, that it's just metal all the time. I consume so much different music, and the good thing is with the others in the band, they do too. And then we can do all this crazy shit, and they're like, oh, I get what you mean. And for Ultha, it's always like the whole is what counts. Every song needs to be a microcosm, but it needs to be part of the effect of the whole thing. And so that's when we constructed these songs. And I finished a trilogy with like All That Has Never Been True, about a person that like starts from not knowing what to do, cheating, lying, stealing, to being completely lost, sort of like karma, if you want to everything around you dying and passing. So that to me was a conclusion. And I was like, what am I going to do now? Write like a lyric for every song and be just like, oh yeah, this is my song about politics. This is my song about this. I'm like, nah, I don't know. I have this kink for like concepts, making music 4-dimensional. So the artwork, the lyrics, the sound, everything has an idea. Everything's intentional on this record. Every sample, every interlude. And so when we had these songs, I was like, how do I want to open it? And then the idea was that the narrator of this record, which is primarily me, but like a person that I think I am, or like a part of me. So you've fallen and everything is fucked. That was the end with Rats Gorge the Moon of All That Has Never Been True. So what now? And I was so annoyed by like these, like these internet metal bands that are like all image all the time, more image than riff or more image than songwriting. But they've got everything in tune except for the music, and that should be the first part that it's in tune. And then there's like, oh yeah, we're a depressive band and everything is darkness and bleak and blah blah blah. I'm like, if you really feel like this, there's a lot of ways to kill yourself, and it's not difficult. Just go ahead and do it. Save us the mediocre music and just go. And I was like, okay, what now? So like I wrote this record about death and like, oh, everything's lost, everything is fucked. How about I do like a Jason Voorhees? Like I come back from the dead. And so my idea was that, and that has something to do later on, we'll probably talk about Cherry Nuts. When my cat died, because that song is about my cat. And she fought for her life for so long when she was diagnosed with cancer. And it's like, hey, she has maybe 2 weeks, and she made it to 3 months, and she just wanted to be here. She wanted to share life with me. And when she passed, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start fighting like a little cat now. And that's the unseen world. It's like, okay, everything's dark and bleak. I'm done. I'm in the casket. And I'm going to dig my way out. And there's this, it's my fist against the coffin. It's my heart still beating. And I'm digging my way out of this. And of course, like I made it through hell, and I'm like, I'm back. I dug myself out. What's the feeling that I have? It's not like, ta-da, life is back. It's like this aggression, like, fuck this shit. And that's love as we're falling down. It's like, I need this. I want this. I want to get out of here. And that's the starting point to the album.
And there's definitely, it's interesting hearing you say that, because there's definitely, particularly towards the back end of the song, there's this very like a almost triumphant thread that comes out in the lyrics. It's kind of that fist pumping, feeling like you can overcome whatever is, it's that typical like fist pumping metal that we all grew up and we all grew up loving. You then kind of throw the first major curveball, which is her still singing limbs, and we've got, and this is again to my ears, you got post-punk, Joy Division, Gun Club influences. I hear like Hans Zimmer, Blade Runner 2049 vibes in the keyboards. It's a really big stylistic departure on the record, but something that's a recurring theme on the album is the sequencing of the record is done in such a way that you kind of hit the listener with something that they don't expect, and then you pull back, you sort of lull them back in, and you go, you almost remind them, hey, this is still an Ultha album, and then you throw them with the next one. But then around the 4-minute mark of this song, you've got this incredible clean singing that kicks in. Who performed those clean vocals on her still singing limbs?
Do you mean the echo of an echo, shadow of a shadow?
Yeah,
that's me,
mate. Where did you get those pipes from?
I don't know. I mean, it's, while I was in studio, it wasn't that comfortable, but it's like always, I mean, it's like the first line is just one, and then it's like doubled for the second, and like put some reverb on. I wish I could do it better, like when I did Ropes of Night and I saw Tom sing, and I was like, if I could sing like him, I would only do music all the time. But like I wanted to have this in there, and it needed to be something that is not too crazy. So the riff underneath still works, and it turned out really, really well. And so, yeah, I'm really happy. I think probably it's my favorite song on the album because it's so different than everything we did before.
It's definitely a song where if you've seen Ultha live, that's a song I can definitely see going over extraordinarily well. I mean, even if you did a set list that covers all of your records, it's still a song that's going to fit in perfectly, even though it's going to sound so different and so distinct.
Can't wait to play this song live. Like, I mean, we've got like right now it's Thursday, and this weekend we will rehearse with everybody for the first time in forever. Preparation for the release tour. We will have Pardis, the singer who sings the next song on the album. And I mean, that you met Danny, and Danny is on the record too. She does the spoken word part in her Still Singing Limbs. And so yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I can't wait to play these songs live, but especially this one. To me, like when like this part with Danny happened, and we've got like this break part, and then it cuts off, and then this part after that, I think, is one of the best melody riffs I've ever written. And whenever we play this in studio, it's like, I mean, usually like this is my smile, but I'm like, because I'm so proud of it, and the keys in this song are just out of this world. Yeah.
So next up, you've got What's Yours Is Yours to Carry. And again, I'm starting to hear industrial influences. I'm, hearing the Swans. I love the female vocals. I think that performance is absolutely magnificent. The contrast between her voice, the harsh black metal vocals, brilliant. I wrote down here, near the end of the track, you realize there haven't been blast beats for 2 tracks now. You don't actually miss them because what you're hearing is so completely absorbing. And then there's a musical reference at the end of that particular track. If you're a Sopranos aficionado like myself, you immediately recognize it as Core Ingrato, also known as Ungrateful Heart. And it's the song that Uncle June sings in the season finale of season 3 of The Sopranos. Was that intentionally a reference to that episode?
It is. Everything. Like I said, everything is intentional, and it's intentional because of the story of this song. Because Pardis, who's singing this song, she sings in a band called Devar. They call themselves Stoner Doom. I'm not a big stoner rock guy, but they're from Cologne, and they're an excellent band. And she's a powerhouse. I mean, she's probably half my size, but she's ripping. And she and I have both been close friends to a guy called Andre, and he passed 2 years ago because of cancer. And he's been a role model to me in a lot of ways because he embraced life to the fullest. And even with his diagnosis of like, okay, this cancer is fatal now, and what do you want to do? It's like, I want to work in the record shop. I want to spend time with my cats, and I want to go to shows. And he did until his last day. And I wanted to pay tribute to him because like every song on this album is about something dark, but with this inch of hope. And that's why I wanted to do the song. And then I asked her, it's like, hey, do you want to be part of this? And she's like, oh yeah, I love this idea. So we wrote the lyrics together. And the thing was, like, I mean, I work at Underdog Records in Cologne now, a few days a month, and it is his position. So like I offered them to help out after he passed. And I'm still donating money from the thing that I get to cancer treatment facilities, because I mean, I don't actually need the money because I earn enough as a teacher, but I can help out my friends and I can be at this record shop. And I remember I often went there without the intention of buying a record, but we talked about stuff, and he was a nerd as much as I am. Comic books, shows, metal, and whatever. And he was the guy that always like pushed, like, you need to watch The Sopranos. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I tried. I didn't like it. And yeah, there's an Ultha poster, cool. But then at one point I was like, yeah, okay, let's start. And then I started watching it. And around the time that I came to season 3 finale, he had gone. And I heard like The Ungrateful Heart, and it broke my heart. And I was like, I want to talk to him about this, but I can't. And I wrote this down, and then I finished, and it's like, oh man, there's so much stuff in The Sopranos that I wanted to talk to him about, but I couldn't. And I was like, I think it would be a good choice to have like this, because we have like this beat that Manu played, and we have it as a loop in the background. And like in The Sopranos, like it's an old school TV show where you still have a lot of people turning TV knobs, like for the channels, and you have them like switching the radios. And that's where I was like, hey, let's fade out the drum beat. And when the last heartbeat stops, you're trying to change the channel because you want to have something new You don't want to be stuck in the past. So it's like this searching for something, and then this part of Cor Ingrato comes up, and I was like, it's a perfect song, like it's a perfect ending to the song, the story, and it has a clear cut for this first chunk of the album that is now gone.
Just as a just as a side note, one thing that I absolutely love about the episode that song is taken from, Army of One, the Tobin Bell cameo, Tobin Bell from Saw, when he says to AJ that he's just outlined a blueprint for him that'll take him to excellence throughout his life, and and that's what you want to know. And the question was, why do they call it 0500 or 0530 in the military? And this is, that'll be made abundantly clear to you.
Such a fucking good show, man. Unbelievable.
Oh, dude. Well, you I'm sure you know this, but there's it's by no coincidence that my daughter's name is Meadow. So, well, that is how much I like the show. I actually got Jamie Lynn Sigler to congratulate her, or to say something about it the day that Meadow was born. So I've shown it to her, and I said, one day when you're old enough, we'll sit down and we'll watch the show together, and you'll see where your namesake comes from.
I got a birthday message from Danhausen. That was cool too.
Oh, that's fucking cool. I did a cameo for a friend of mine where I got Devon Dudley to send him a birthday message. And I was like, we're both massive fans, huge fans of New Jack, huge fans of Rob Van Dam. And, it's probably like 3-4 minutes. He was talking about, we used to travel a lot, me and New Jack. He was obviously there with the New Jack mass transit incident. But anyway, that's for a different podcast. Hex Upon Our Heads is next. I think, this comes back to the sequencing conversation that we had earlier. I think it was a good idea to sequence a heavier, a faster, more aggressive track at this point in the album, because it almost helps anchor you back to the fact that you're listening to an Ultha album. But then the extremity we learn is short-lived, because the latter half of the song is this really brooding, minimalist piece. It sounds very, almost slightly despairing, and it sets up Sister Faith and Sister Chance really, really well. One thing I will give you flowers for on this record, amongst many, is you've become incredibly smart at how you deploy complexity and how you deploy simplicity. You know exactly when to dial back and just let a very simple guitar line or guitar melody do the talking. And when it comes time to layer things on and to turn up the voltage, as I say, or as I like to say, you do that. And I think Hex Upon Our Heads is a great example of that. And then Sister Faith and Sister Chance is kind of the first closing of a loop on the album. It's kind of where you almost are throwing together all of these new elements that you've brought to the Ultha sound, mixing it in with the old. And again, it's almost like it's in its own way sort of a conclusion of a chapter before you go on to the next part of the record.
That's exactly the idea. So by this point, if you have the vinyl, it's the first of the 2 LPs that you have to change. So I am an incredibly nerdy guy about sequencing of stuff, and that's because conducting a movie, you need to have this to follow it by that. There was a discussion about switching hex and what's yours is yours to carry, and I was like, her still singing limbs is very hypnotic, but still there's a lot happening, so it needs to calm down with what's yours is yours to carry. And it's going to be the A side of the vinyl is then Unseen World, Love, her still singing limbs, and then it's also this flingering, the bells are stopping. So this is throughout the whole 3 first songs. So we flip over, and then starts with the drum loop of what's yours is yours to carry, goes into Hex, and then into Sister, and then it calms down until we go to the second chapter of the album. So that was the idea. And I mean, Hex Upon Our Head is probably one of the most hectic riffs I've ever written. And that was like completely by chance, because it was supposed to be the intro to Sister Faith. We had like this song constructed and deconstructed, played faster, played slower. And I wrote something where it's like, oh man, let's write something that completely falls apart and then goes into Sister Faith. And we tried it and we're like, it's not working. But then like we had this blast beat, and then Manu thought he needed to play like a fill. And he started playing this fill, and I was like on these high notes. I'm like, hey, wait, this almost sounds like Majority Rule or like a screamo band from the 90s. It's like, let's do like this completely weirdo, hectic blast beat, black metal, almost grindish song. Then we have like this hardcore part where we like have crew shouts, and then we break it down into like a Boren and the Club of Gore part. And then it was like, okay, we have like, there's these 4 notes that we keep on playing. And I was playing around the whole day on the piano, like to fill in the loops between like the gaps between these 4 notes. And at some point I was like, no, there's already so much. Let's just step on these 4 and just let them breathe. Because then afterwards, Sister Faith will be even more impactful. And I'm glad we didn't like include anything there. And then like the settle, like, then going into the post-punk like drum beat that Manu starts, it's also, I'm really proud of that.
It's a lost art in many ways, album sequencing, I think, and I love the fact that you pay so much attention to it, because, I mean, I'm the sort of person I literally will, when I'm bored, sit obsessively and like, okay, how would I resequence Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 into like one album? That sounds fucking awesome. And I'm thinking along the same lines that you are, like, well, you know, you have to have this kind of song to follow this kind of song, and you absolutely hear it on this record, no question about it.
Thank you.
So then you get to Cherry Knots, which really does come as a surprise after, you know, almost this kind of semi-closure offered by Sister Faith and Sister Chance, and it's kind of almost like you're saying, you know, if you thought the surprises were over, buckle up. I'm hearing, I mean, firstly, that the piano that you use in this track is really beautiful, really haunting, and then this unbelievable chorus kicks in at 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And I hear Depeche Mode, I hear like Massive Attack influences. It's all pulled through the Ultha ringer, but it's really brooding, it's really foreboding. Absolutely one of the highlights of the album for me. As different as it is from anything that you guys have ever done, it is head and shoulders, you know, on a list of many songs that I love. I mean, I don't think there's a single song I don't love on the record, but this particular song is just the song.
That's crazy. I'm so glad you're saying this, because I mean, it's probably the one that's closest to my heart, as it's about my cat. And it's like, I just wanted to do something like, oh yeah, look at this spooky heavy black metal people, torches and, you know, scythes and swords. And there's Ultha, the faggot band. Then they write a song about a dead cat. You know, it's like, that was like kind of a joke for me. But that song, I wanted to pay tribute to Audrey. And because she pretty much like kickstarted the whole process that I'm in right now, and that made me become the guy that I am today. And when we started writing this album, there's always reference bands. So at some point I feel like when I think about an album, there's I listen to a lot of music in this phase. And then there's albums that all of a sudden like, oh, okay, this is it. So these are my blueprints. And no, there's no metal album that has like a reference point for A Light So Dim. Probably the closest might be a Neurosis album. But it's funny that you just named the 2 bands that are the most referential, which is like Mezzanine by Massive Attack, and both Ultra and Memento Mori of Depeche Mode. They are like the way they conduct these albums in their hierarchy, and, you know, like the sequencing, and that every song is a microcosm in itself. These are the reference points. Maybe White Pony by Deftones and stuff like this. And that song came from my addiction to the band Coil, that has been like growing to be one of my top 5 bands of all time. And they have like these, in all the chaos they did and like the noise, they have like these super beautiful 2 albums, music to play in the dark. And I had been listening to them obsessively, and they have like 2 songs that have kind of like the same vibe. And it's like, okay, what can I do with it? And then I started like, I tried to learn piano, and you know, the song that I always try to learn, and I still can't play it, is Suspirium by Tom York from the Suspiria soundtrack. You know how much I love this album and how like important it was for the last record. But like in like trying to play this, I came up with the melody, and I'm like, I always, you know, if you listen to this album, people could say like, oh yeah, so he has like probably played shit into his computer and then he laid. No, it's like my songwriting, I'm a complete dullard when it comes to this. So I still record a riff on my phone, and then I hum the second melody and record it on my phone, and it's all in my head. And I use a loop station, and that's what I did. Like I plugged the loop station into my pedal board and the pedal board into my piano. And then it's like, okay, let's crank up the reverb, have the melody. And I started conducting this, and I had like this phrasing of vocals in my head. And I was like, I want to give credit where credit is due. And all 3 animals that changed my life. So Cooper, the first cat, Audrey, the second cat, and Titus, the dog, has all been through Danny, who's been such an integral part of my life for so long. And I had her as the cover girl for Ropes of Night album. It's like, since she's on Mercher and she's always on tour with us, like I want to have her on that record, and especially on that song. So she doubled my vocals, and it became this really emotional song, especially at the end when it like layer upon layer builds up to this grandiose finale, which is like almost Swans-esque. And it's so funny that like this is the track that most people call it, like this is the track. I'm like, really? That one? So like I'm so happy that it is that way. But I thought like a lot of people will be like, skip. But you never know, and I'm very proud.
Well, you know, as an aside, you know, you mentioned that you might get you feel like you might get lip from people when it comes to the fact that you singing a song about your cat. But I mean, come on. I'm you know, we're both in our 40s. I can say without any shame whatsoever, when we put Cooch down last year, that was easily the most I've cried in my entire life. There's no point trying to even sugarcoat it. And I'm not, you know, I'm not ashamed to say it either. Anyone that has a, you know, that wants to, you know, has anything to say about it can go pound sand. But it's, you know, I think anyone who hasn't had a pet doesn't realize just how close and connected you get to them, and that, you know, when the day comes that you have to say goodbye, I mean, it's a pain that you can't describe to somebody. No. You know, and the only way that I don't believe that you ever get over the pain of losing an animal. I think what ends up happening is it's a little like standing in the ocean where the water is uncomfortably cold and the waves keep splashing up against you, and eventually you're going to get used to it to a point, but it's never going to become pleasant. You know what I mean? You're gonna get used to the idea that they're not there anymore. And what I try and do is I try and live in the good memories that they left behind. You know, I'll see something that happens and I'll go, oh, I remember when she used to do this or when she used to do that. And you kind of try and bask in the sunlight of those memories rather than the darkness of their absence. But the sadness never goes away. You never get over it. You know, I know when something happens to Bailey, who, you know, people will have seen in the background of, you know, if they watch it on YouTube, they'll see her in the background a lot. That's not going to be something I'm going to handle well.
Dude, like when like Titus is already like getting really old, and I'm incredibly scared of the moment when he will pass, because I have no idea how I will cope with that. And I mean, he is Danny's dog, and I only have him like a few times, but like Audrey, was like when we broke up and like all that shit happened that led to the inextricable wandering. She was the one that was always here. So letting her go like was super hard. And half a year later, exactly 6 months to the day after she has gone, something happened that like gave me a shock, and I broke down and I like smashed my head and lay in my apartment for not 2 days, for 2 hours, unconsciously. And that was the point. I was like, oh no, something needs to change here. And I, like speaking about her now, I could instantaneously start crying because this like, and it's 3 years past like her like passing, and that's where the last sentence in the song comes from, because that's the way I help myself making sense of it. And that's the sentence that I tell like my students in school, because it's incredibly sad to see how much grief I have to console in school, like how many kids lose loved ones. And to kids it's even harder because they've not been cursed by life, and I mean, I've seen death by now, but nothing ever hit me like Audrey's death. But to me, it's like, like 3.5 years later, and it would take me like 4 pictures on my phone to get me like crying. And that's when I wrote the sentence, grief is only law of perceiving, because as much as it pains, it is to me, it's a reminder of like how strong love is that I still feel for her. And that kind of consoled me in the process and still does. And that's why I wanted to have the sentence in this song.
Yeah, the thing is, the modern world doesn't make it easier for us to get over things either, because before we kept everything in photo albums. Our photo albums now are our phones. If you have a Google phone, you keep getting memories coming up. I mean, I constantly get memories coming up of our cats, because we've had 2 that have passed away. The clan is now back to 9 though, because I knew at some point I started getting. There was a feral cat that was handed in at the vet where my wife works, and I started getting a few too many photos, and I knew we were getting a new one. So he's turned up now. His name is Max. Cool. But which I got from Mad Max. She limits how many of the animals I can name after she realized that I had named Pearl after the movie Pearl, so which is the name of one of our other cats. But anyway, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But again, I think that feeling of sadness to both of our points, it doesn't really ever go away, and you kind of get modern life as a way of reminding you of it. So you have to choose to, like I said, treat those memories as special rather than just reminders of the fact that you feel sad. But anyway, we then go to Pink Light's Swirling Copper, and this is kind of for me where the record hits its final stretch. And you've got a song here that feels to me slightly apocalyptic in tone. There's a lot of more anxiety, relatively speaking, in this song, more aggression, more of a sense of impending danger, impending doom. The same kind of experimental knack is there that you've had across the other songs, but you've now also added a slightly sort of almost punky edge to the rhythm, and that carries through the majority of the song, but it serves as a great way to set up these final 2 songs, which we'll get to in a second.
It's our high-speed Godflesh song.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's like if you put a Godflesh record that is on 33 and you put it on 45, it will sound like this. And it's it is definitely my influence of we in the same session with this album we recorded the Ministry cover, which was actually supposed to be the hidden bonus track. So my nerdy brain wanted to have a CD because there's a Digipack CD and a jewel case, and I wanted just to have the jewel case a hidden bonus track like the 90s records. But then we ended up with like 74 minutes of music and no CD can take more. We're like, fuck. So that's where we put out the Ministry cover beforehand. But it's like, my love for Ministry, Godflesh, you know, like these sorts of bands, also like my past with Fear Factory when Demanufacture came out and this kind of stuff. So I wanted to have this mechanic beat, which is also very adjacent to the krautrock bands that come from the area where I live, you know, and it's just like this, which is like a punk beat. And I thought, like, I mean, is it so different from black metal? Because we often in black metal, we have like, we call it like the ignorance beat. So like, you know, like you have the blast and then it's like a lot of like belter do this all the time, like and it's like a machine gun. And I was like, hey, let's write a song where Manu is just like going and then it's like I had like a new pedal that I played around, which made the guitar sound like a harmonium. And yeah, I mean the idea here, because again, the end of Cherry Knot, like this way, the end of Cherry Knots is like fading out, but then it starts into this almost like locust-esque, you know, like the swarm of the locusts coming, beginning of Pink Light Soiling to Copper. And this is my first political Ultha song, whereas like always, like, you know, I always said like Ultha is political people playing black metal, but we're not a political band. But this song is triggered by the way like world's politics are right now, with the absolute insanity that is going on. And that's the reference to, like, I mean, the song title is about blood being shed, the blood that it's in your veins and when it comes out of your veins. And it's about the ignorance of people on social media fighting, you know, justice wars on a keyboard on Twitter or something. And it is from my cat died, the most real of scenarios, the most intimate of scenarios, to like going to the fury that a superficial world that, you know, butts heads about the most stupid shit, where we could just like talk to each other instead of about each other. But you can take the narrative, you can take it for, you know, the Palestine-Israel conflict, you can take it to Ukraine, Russia, what Trump is doing, but you can also do it about scene politics and people like still. And, you know, like I spoke to this about like on another podcast. For years, I've been really not enraged, but like hurt when people were like, yeah, Ultha is destroying the black metal scene. And I was like, why? Like, why don't you just not care about us? We're not going to take away your Burzum wannabe bands. Like, you can have them. Like, you know, I don't care. But like this album and the point where I'm at right now, especially like after stepping away from everything, is like, I really don't care anymore. But like the stupidity in this world and people not talking to, but like only about each other. And if you don't have my opinion, you're my enemy and I need to crush you, where there's no middle ground anymore. And that's what this song is about. And that's why it needed this punkish kind of fury without being a punk song. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is so that, generally speaking, in I mean, modern life right now, I thought for a period of time that it was getting a little better and that it just seems to have gotten 1,000 times worse. I mean, you and I, we've spoken about this before. We have quite wildly different opinions on a lot of things politically, but I'm pretty sure if we sat down and we just spoke on issues, we're probably going to find that we agree on a lot more things than we disagree on. And that's always been the frustration for me as well, which is actually why I've taken a conscious decision. I've mentioned this on the news rant. I've taken a conscious decision to dial back talking about anything political, because it's just, there's no point anymore. Like for like, I can't achieve, you know, there's no one that you're going to convince of your opinion. They're just going to think you're some sort of blowhard or some, you know, they will mischaracterize you. They will misinterpret your intentions. And then the other 50%, you'll just be preaching to the choir, and they'll be going, "Yay!" You know, when again, I probably agree with some things that one side say and some things another side say, like the vast majority of people. So yeah, I've dialed back on talking about things like that. If I have a guest that wants to talk about that, of course I'm more than happy to talk about it. I'm not going to dictate where the conversation goes otherwise, or go somewhere else. But I just feel like everyone nowadays, when it comes to politics in particular, it's emotions first and everything else second. And that's it's just not, is healthy. You can't, because it gets then to a point where, and this has been my fear, and it is one thing I've mentioned on the show many times. It gets to a point where it becomes us or them. Yeah. There's no longer any question about how we're going to find a way to coexist peacefully, or at least staying out of each other's hair. It's, if you don't agree with every single thing that I say, exactly to what you just said earlier, you're now the enemy. Yeah. And the rhetoric around who the enemy is becoming so much more vitriolic and so much more. There's such a disregard for people's well-being and people's like their right to exist. It's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, and that's where my mind stopped coping. Where I'm like, okay, I'm done with this shit, because as soon as the comment section on YouTube, Instagram, or whatever becomes becomes your reference point for reality, we've lost. And that's the point where we're at. And, seeing in Germany, left-wing people fighting left-wing people because the one say you're fascist, the other one say no, you're fascist. And right-wing assholes looking at it and God, you're so stupid. And what are we doing here? And that's the thing, and that's an art that got lost. And I mean, look at us. I mean, that's the thing. When I speak to people about it, I keep mentioning you, not because you're my enemy, but Jackie is one of the nicest people I've ever met in the scene. I tell them, and we had great conversations. But he posts pictures of half a pork that is on his roast, where I'm just marinating my tofu, and it's
yeah,
and it's then there will be people in the comment section, and I hope, please, people don't. It's not worth it. But especially in wrestling, for example, the comment section, the AW versus WWE thing. It's so stupid because it needs both things so things can grow. And that's when kids in school ask me, "Do you want us all to be vegan?" It's I would love for everybody to treat animals with more respect, so we didn't have this mass animal thing going, so everybody can have salami for €1. But it wouldn't work the other way around. If we'd all be vegan, the earth would also be fucked. And it's people don't really step away and try to see the bigger picture. And that's the thing, in this scene that is also in the black metal thing was in the beginning, yeah, you're not a black metal band because you don't look the part, or you say you're political, and black metal was always about provocation. I'm why? It's if I have this opinion, what does it do to you? You're on a computer typing in words and wasting your life's energy, this trying to tell me I'm wrong, and I don't care what you think. If someone comes up to me at a show, it's hey, I would like to talk about it, I'll do it. We spoke about things where I'm I know you're you have a different opinion about it than I have, but still we're friends and we can coexist. And I think that's the essence that has gotten lost with this narrow-minded bullshit that is going on everywhere.
The thing is, you're going to build a lot more bridges when you start from a foundation of friendship, and then you can have a conversation with someone and go, "Hey, I'm genuinely interested to understand your perspective on what's going on here, or this particular issue here. Tell me what tell me from your point of view why you believe what you believe." But I feel like that intellectual curiosity has also gotten lost. I've always loved the old Louis Theroux documentaries, where he was going out and he was spending a week at the WCW power plant, and then he was spending a week at the Bunny Ranch, and he was spending a week with a bunch of white supremacists, and all he was doing was just letting them talk. He wasn't feeding them any narrative. He was just letting them talk and kind of present who and what they are. And sometimes you learn that there's a human being behind it, and sometimes you realize, hey, well, this person's an even bigger asshole than I thought. But still, there's that intellectual curiosity, and I feel like that's just completely taboo now. You can't have a conversation with somebody that one side dislikes intensely.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I understand the people that criticize this and say you can't give a racist a platform because he already has too many platforms. I understand that, but I also understand your curiosity. let's talk about it. And I mean, there's a German podcast that like recently tried it, and they had like an NSBM guy on, and it like complete backfired. But it was funny because the guy was a complete fool. But like still, I mean, they attempted it and they got blasted. And I'm like, I understand why people blast you for this, but if that's your thing and you want to try it out, like, okay, I don't hate you for that. And that's the thing now, like people are now like, these are the enemies. I'm like, I understand why you don't like the decision, what they did, but I don't like it. I don't want to listen to like a Nazi asshole. I mean, that guy was just like, like a car wreck of this train of thought was completely absurd. But in general, like I understand this, and it doesn't make me hate a person. And I dialed back on the usage of the word hate in the recent years. And like, I hate racism because I think it's the most stupid idea that has ever been created. Do I understand why some people get educated to believe that they're better? Like, yeah, it's stupid, and I wish you could learn more. But that's the thing, like me being a teacher. I work almost exclusively with people that have a religious background. In school, like 80% of the kids I teach are Muslim, and they like gibberish what their parents tell them. Or like, that there's a mosque in the town where I work, where like a German that went to become a like Salafist, and he came back and he's doing boxing training with kids there. And then these kids come and talk complete bullshit. And they're like, yeah, but the Quran says like, no, it doesn't. I read the Quran. Like I read it 3 times and it's not in there. I have Turkish friends that I speak about this. You're fucking up the reputation of the Muslims with the bullshit that this asshole is feeding you. Make up your fucking mind yourself, and don't use TikTok as a reference point. And that's the thing. Like, I would love for people to think more and actually like do research and make up your mind. If you come out of this and are still a racist, well, I can help you, and I don't need to talk to you about this.
Yeah,
and that's even this part that I just said could be taken out of context, and I would be the asshole again, and it wouldn't be the first time.
Well, if let's use a non-music and even a non-political example, just to explain what I'm talking about when I talk about this curiosity. I am sure you are as well. I've watched a ton of serial killer documentaries. I think that's probably one of the few things that Netflix does well. But like, I watched the Night Stalker documentary. I watched the Ted Bundy tapes. I'm not a supporter of Ted Bundy's work. I'm not. I don't go, hey, that Richard Ramirez character, he was onto something. Like
what a guy.
The two guys. I mean, if you know my thoughts on how law and order needs to be enforced, you know my thoughts on them. But I'm genuinely curious to know, what are you thinking? Like, why are you thinking this way?
Yeah.
What got you to this point? But anyway, so we get to the final 2 songs, The Quiet Current. There is something about the opening guitar lines on this song that remind me a little bit of a track off one of my favorite Bloodhouse Nord albums, Memoria of a Tooster 2, Dialogue with the Stars, the song, The Meditant, Dialogue with the Stars. And I don't know whether that is something that you intentionally did or whether you're a big Bloodhouse Nord fan, but it definitely came out to me again, until the clear. Now it has that that opening guitar, and then these fucking incredible clean vocals kick in, and this really is probably the biggest stylistic departure on the album. For me, it starts to get to a point here where you guys feel less like kindred spirits with, let's take any black metal band, Mayhem, and more kindred spirits with a band like Crippled Black Phoenix. And I don't know if you like Crippled Black Phoenix, but that kind of creative freewheeling and that just sort of, I'm just drawing from this broad palette and it's all just coming together in this seamless whole. Years where it really kind of snaps into very, very vivid focus for me.
And that's kind of like why I placed the song there and why I wanted to have it in the way that it is. So actually, the opening riff was part of another song that we didn't end up using. And it was supposed to come out of the end of Love as We're Falling Down. So there's something underneath before, like we added there's this break, like in Love as We're Falling Down, where Chris and I sing like one line each, and then this heroic end part. In the part before that, which was supposed to be the original ending, there are the same notes that are in the Quiet Currents opening. So the idea was to have these back to back, and then this riff like shifted into the end part of her still singing limbs, and that's where it's still in. Like you can hear the same notes in her still singing limbs, but now it's at the end. It's the second actual song. So because the Unseen World is like the intro, but like, you know, her still singing limbs is the second song, and now it's the second to last song. And the way this one ends, this one opens. So you've got like the butterfly again. And so Andy played this, and like I wrote it and I couldn't play it really well. And so like in one of the rehearsals with 3 guitars, he played this, and then we arranged the song. And that's the only song that is being played with 3 guitars. And when we will play this song live, which we cannot do at the moment because the lady that sang on the song, she just became a mother, and Peter, the singer, he's in China right now. But we will do it in October for our hometown show, because the 2 people singing on that song is from the band called Tuck, and they used to be in a band called the Black Heart Rebellion. And they are very close to Cripple Black Phoenix, where they also do whatever they want. And they're like, to me, Tuck is like Ultha without metal. So there's a very genuine connection there, also on a humane level. And I just love this band to death. And I wanted to have them on a song. And I wanted to write. I mean, we had Rachel of Espen and the Witch on Converging Sins, and that was already like a very mellow song, but it was still heavy. But like for this, I wanted to have like, okay, this is supposed to be Ultha playing a Tuck song, pretty much. Like, how would I write a Tuck song? And I pretty much wrote this song for them. And we tried to make it the most sad and beautiful song. And I gave them complete creative freedom about the lyrics and the way they sing. I just told them what the album's about, what the idea is, where the placement of the song is, and that's so we wrote and recorded the song without knowing what the vocals will be or the singing. Then we send it to them. It took them a month to record it. They send it back. Andy and I placed it together in the studio, and we just looked at each other and were like, oh, this is perfect. And it is very much the most far out thing we've ever done. But then the idea was to have the Abelia strings after that to, you know, like get us back into the fold. So it's like the last blossoming of like beauty before it gets like really bleak. Yeah.
Well, it's also the one thing on a record that is generally speaking very unpredictable. The one thing that was predictable is you're always going to finish with a very lengthy epic song, which you do there. You've got that sample at the beginning of the track. That's from Mulholland Drive, is it not? Is it not? What is it from?
White Lotus, season 3.
Oh, okay.
It's Walton Goggins. He has. Did you see that show?
No, I do. I'm a very big fan of Walton Goggins, though.
Dude, like White Lotus is something at the beginning I was like, wow, this doesn't look like something I wanted to watch. But like it is such a good mirror to the depravity of humans, especially like the rich ones. Every like 3 seasons, they all play like in different like luxury hotels, and it's so good. It's really like it's like watching like a car wreck. And so he plays like this fucked up guy that is out on a revenge mission, and his girlfriend who's like thinking, hey, we just have a great holiday. And it's like, yeah, you're so tense and you need to do something. And she gets him to actually go to a shrink and like in a meditation center in, I think it's in Thailand. And like the meditation worker, she's like, oh, you need to open up your mind and this. And then he's like, okay, listen. And then he starts like with this monologue, and it's like just like the bleakest thing where like, okay, this guy is really fucked up. And that's like, I heard this and I'm like, oh, I love this. And I love Walton Goggins. So that's why I wanted to have this in the beginning, because it shows like, so we've come so far But then there's these parts in your life when everything is like, okay, you're enraged, you're in love, and everything is black, and you can put into the light. But there will be these phases that are almost like there's nothing you can do. But then it says in the chorus, the light is mine. So like you have to remind yourself, like, the light is still there. Don't give up. You're almost there. That's kind of like the last stretch of the song. That's why it's so monotonous in the beginning. And I also wanted to have like a really lengthy, hypnotic Ultha song to, again, the butterfly thing with like the beginning of Love as We're Falling Down and Unseen World before that is the same thing that happens in the end of Part the Abelia Springs. So it's pretty much, it's a loop.
Well, brother, you have dropped another massive surprise, I think, on everybody in 2026. Anyone who hasn't checked the album out yet needs to do so at once. I want to say thank you very, very much for your time. Always great catching up with you, my man. And just congratulations on a career best work, in my opinion. I mean, there's no question. As much as I love the previous record, to me, this is just on a totally different level.
I'm so happy you like it. I'm really curious, like, if it will pass the test of time, how many people will say, I'm still on board, or maybe that's too much now. But in the end, it doesn't matter because it will always be about what we want to do. It's our creative expression. And we're so blessed that so many people are still with us from day one, and that we've got great supporters like you, the other Horsemen. And I'm always glad to be guest here, to call you my friend, and can't wait to see you. Do you go to Damnation Fest? Will I see you there?
No, I won't be at Damnation Fest this year, but there's something else that I'll talk to you about off air that is going to happen next year. That's going to be quite cool. You need to go to that. All right. So on that note, thank you very much, my brother. Guys, stick around. I've got Unsanctioned Filth and the Weekly News Rant coming up straight after this. First, we're going to listen to some First, we're going to listen to some Ultha. I'm going to say thank you very much to Ralph for his time.
Let's go!
There you have it, my friends. My conversation with my very good friend Ralph Schmidt. It is always a pleasure having him on the show, but even more so when it comes off the back of a record that I truly believe is going to be the album that Ultha and that Ralph is remembered for. A Light So Dim is the name of the album. You just heard a song called Love As We're Falling Down, and it is available right now on Vendetta Records. I will post a link to the Ultha Bandcamp in the description to the podcast. Make sure that you head over there and that you shower Ultha with praise and gratitude for putting out something this extraordinary. And of course, when you do, you let them know who it was who sent you. Massive thank you to Ralph for his time. That is an exclusive, by the way. My understanding is that there is going to be no other interviews. I know he did one in German, and I know there's a wrestling-themed episode coming up on Horrorwolf 666 next week, but this is potentially going to be the only one that you get to hear about the new album. And as I said, that new album, absolutely fucking extraordinary. Now, keeping with the Horsemen theme this week, I did want to talk a little bit about another band that features multiple members of the Horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse, and they form the centerpiece of this week's Unsanctioned Filth segment. Hollow Lands is the name of the project, and it features none other than Mike Hill, the host of Everything Went Black and Necromaniacs, of course, also the main man behind Tombs and Scorpion Throne, the sinister minister, Karl Hikara, the host of the Soul Knox podcast, and then close associate, high-ranking general in the Legion and close associate of the Horsemen, Drugoth, is on drums. They have put out an EP an EP called Hollow Lands. It's available on Bandcamp right now, and for your listening pleasure, this is a track called The Haunting. That was Hollow Lands with a song entitled The Haunting, this week's Unsanctioned Filth Spotlight. And fun fact, in addition to the men that I already mentioned form part and parcel of this project, you also had Matt Wilcock, the mighty Matt Wilcock, contributing a guitar solo to the beginning of that song. So absolutely fantastic stuff. And something that I think if you've been part of this thing of ours, the Horsemen, the Legion, whatever you want to call it, it kind of feels like something that is probably... And there have been a couple of organic projects that have sprouted from this blessed or this unholy union. But yeah, this probably feels like one of the most homegrown projects yet. And I think it sounds absolutely sensational. As always, I'll post the HoloLands Bandcamp link in the description to the podcast. So make sure that you support it. You can also check out HoloLands via the website intothenecrosphere.com, where I have all of the bands that I have featured on the Unsanctioned Filth segment of the show. And then a reminder, in case you don't know, you've got a deluge of great podcasting content coming your way starting on a Monday, courtesy of the Cosa Nostra of podcasting, otherwise known as the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. We start with Horrorwolf 666 on a Monday, hosted by Brandon Legion. I am your man every Tuesday with Into the Necrosphere. Next week, my guest is Sam Bean from Werewolves, so make sure you look out for that one. On a Wednesday, we got your first double shot. There's Everything Went Black, hosted by Mike Hill. There's also Iblis Manifestations, hosted by Cheyenne. And then on a Thursday, we've got Necromaniacs, one of my favorite podcasts of the week. Mike Hill is back for that. He's joined by Mike Scandado and Jeff Kashid. And we've also got Soul Knox, the first of two installments of Soul Knox, as a matter of fact. One comes your way on a Sunday, the other comes your way on a Thursday, and that's hosted by the sinister minister himself, the Reverend Karl Hikara. I mentioned the Into the Necrosphere website, intothenecrosphere.com. I've not only got the Unsanctioned Filth recipients on there, but you can also check out things like show playlists. There's a contact form, so if you're in an unsigned band and you want to get in touch, or if you want to submit a question for the Weekly News Rant, you can do so on there. And speaking of the Weekly News Rant, my friends, right before I kick that off, I got a public service announcement. If you've ever seriously used the phrases looks maxing and aura farming, then you're an absolute fucking nerd and it's time for you to hit the bricks, because this is my Weekly News Rant.
A roundabout for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
Okay, Legion, as always, we kick off on metalstorm.net, the finest metal news website in all the land, and we are going to dive straight into some new music. Archaic Oath have presented a new song. Melodic black metalers Archaic Oath have revealed Wrath of the Witches. It is their third single from their upcoming debut record, Determined to Death and Beyond. That is due out on April the 24th, 2026 via Art of Propaganda. I somehow missed the first two. I've got no idea what these guys sound like, so let's give this one a quick spin and see whether it cuts the mustard. All right, I'm going to pause there. By the way, in case you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering why is old Jackson wearing his spectacles? Also, why is he sounding so fucking bunged up, and why does it look like he's crying all the time? That is because I have been dealt a almost a knockout blow by seasonal hay fever and a fucking head cold that I need like a bullet to the brain ahead of flying to Mumbai. But I'm going to be powering through. Unfortunately, it does mean that, I actually recorded 2 episodes of the podcast this weekend. I had to put myself on mute constantly because I burst into sneezing fits. Like I said, it may mean that I sound a little bit more nasally than usual. But anyway, just thought I would mention that specifically because I don't want you thinking that my eyes watering is me sobbing because the music I'm listening to is so touching and so moving. As it goes, Archaic Oath, it's not bad. I think I will give them one thing right from the off, and that is that the performance certainly sounds very convincing. It sounds like there is a very high sense of self-belief from these guys. They clearly enjoy what they're doing. They believe in what they're doing. And that is great. But for me, this comes back to something I've mentioned in years gone by, but I think in 2026 is more relevant than ever. And that is that if I had heard this record 20 years ago, I would have thought that it was the absolute bee's knees. You hear influences of, from Nagelfar, Dissection, Dawn. It's got, very, very strong second wave black metal influences, and it is executed very, very well. The problem is, even if you're going to be a band that rely so heavily on your influences and on your inspirations, you still need to do something a little different to stand out from the crowd. And I don't necessarily know whether Archaic Oath have convinced me that they are able to rise above just the plethora of amazing releases coming out in 2026. I can see that they will have their audience, no doubt about that. And this is their debut album, so it very well could be that they put out this record and then album number 2, album number 3, they start to experiment a little bit more, color outside the lines a bit more freely, and that could certainly turn into something very interesting because they sound as though they've got the chops. There's no question about that. But I'm undecided at the moment. I will also, again, throw the caveat up that I have only listened to 2 minutes of an Archaic Oath song, so that, that's not enough to completely write the band off and call them rubbish. Far from it, as a matter of fact. They're not rubbish at all. But will they be a band that I will remember when it comes time to finalize that top 30 list of 2026? On the evidence, I would say probably not. Okay. I think it's time for us to move on from that one. There is a new Trelldom single out, and I absolutely know you guys are going to be keen to get my thoughts on that. Now, when it comes to Trelldom, I think we've all come to the conclusion now that we have to expect the unexpected. I was a lot more positive towards late stage career Trelldom after that last single that they put out, the first one of the forthcoming record. Certainly much more so than I felt about the previous record in its entirety. So it remains to be seen what I'm going to be thinking of this new single. It's entitled Folding the Mind. It says here that it is the newest preview track from Trelldom's upcoming studio record, By the Word. That album, of course, will be released by Prophecy Productions, and since they haven't done us the solid of putting the release date in there, let me just look that up in case you're interested or in case you're counting down the minutes. May the 29th, 2026 is when that record is coming out. For some bizarre reason on Metal Archives, they say that the album is going to be released independently, but we know that is not correct. It's getting put out by the fine folks at Prophecy Productions. The song, By the Word, as I said, I was a lot more positive about than I was about the previous record. So let's hear what Folding the Mind sounds like. I'm going to pause there, although I will just, in the interest of full disclosure, say that I have listened through the whole song. It does go into a couple of different stages from what we heard there. Part of the reason I did that was I learned my lesson after saying that I wasn't convinced by the Gothram single that they put out last week, because when I actually went back and I listened to that whole song, that big build-up that I said I was looking for, it actually came about maybe 20 seconds before I paused. So I have listened to this whole Trelldom track, and I can tell you it doesn't, it's not just as repetitive as we heard it being now. I mean, there is a theme pulling through the whole track. It's not like it's completely unrecognizable by the end. But the thing for me about Trelldom, and certainly this is true of the previous record and of this record, it's going to be very hard to make a solid judgment on the quality of what you're hearing if you don't hear the whole record in its entirety. The previous record was written to be listened to sequentially, and I think is best enjoyed as a start to finish experience. That is absolutely the impression that I'm getting from the new material taken from this record. This single, for for those interested, is actually the song that on the album is straight after the first single that they released. So you've got By the Word as track number 4, and then you've got Folding the Mind that we just listened to now as track number 5. So it would be very interesting to see how this all fits into the grand scheme of the record, into the concept musically of the album. But what I've heard, I do quite enjoy. I like the fact that the saxophone is now used kind of less to overpower the music and more as a means of setting just a really sort of ominous, almost neo-noir type of tone in the music. There's something about it that reminds me a little of the score to Sin City, and I will ask him if I ever have the opportunity to speak to him again, but I highly doubt that Karl is a fan of the Sin City movies. But if you go back and you watch those films, you might pick up what I'm talking about. There's something maybe in the dissonant way in which the saxophones are used, but they create a sense of unease rather than try to be something musical. I mean, generally speaking, you all know my view on saxophone is not positive. So when it's used like that, actually something else it reminds me of a bit is Ken Mode. And Ken Mode is one of the few bands that have been able to use it and use it highly effectively. And I think it's used effectively here as well. Karl sounds great. This song, like the previous single, sounds a bit more riff heavy than I recall the previous record being. And again, Karl and all of his musical compatriots are guys that seem to be intent on surprising us and doing what we least expect them to do. Having said that, I will confess once again that there is a part of me that does hope that one day we will be surprised by by a release that harkens back to the glory of Tillmina, the Trelldom record from 2007. And as I have said so many times on this podcast, if you have not heard that album, do yourself a favor, go back and listen to it straight away, because it is absolutely fantastic. All right, before we go any further, let me answer a quick question sent in over the weekend. Griff_in has asked, I've just bought a Weber charcoal barbecue. What are your top tips for barbecuing steak on the Weber? I love questions like that. I can't imagine there's all that many metal podcasts where you're going to hear questions about how to barbecue steak, but I'll give you 3 tips if you own a Weber charcoal barbecue. And of course, for anybody that doesn't know or doesn't have the reference in their mind if they're listening to this, he's talking about the Weber kettle, which is just a round, cylindrical barbecue. Absolutely fucking fantastic. I don't personally think that you really need any other barbecue for charcoal grilling. You can also use the Weber charcoal barbecue for smoking, which is great. That's pro tip for anybody that wants to barbecue this summer and doesn't own one. Don't spend your money on bullshit. Just go out and buy yourself the Weber. I think they call it the Master Touch Premium. It's about £300 here in the UK. Sometimes you can get it on a sale for less, but that will last you for the next 15 years at least. So Griff_in, I'll give you 3 tips. Tip number 1, when it comes to grilling steak, is master 2-zone cooking. So on one side of your grill, you should have a heap of lit charcoal. On the other side, you should have nothing. Why? Because you want to sear your steak on the lit charcoal, and you then want to move your steak off onto the unlit portion of the grill, put the lid on, and let it finish off slowly. So normally what I do is I'll do 2 minutes either side on the lit charcoal, then I'll move it off onto the unlit side, and it's usually about 4 minutes. I'll turn it over 4 minutes. That unlit section is when the lid comes on. So you kind of have convection cooking taking place there as well. And then tip number 2, tying into tip number 1, have yourself a digital meat thermometer. Don't skimp on what you buy. You don't have to spend hundreds of pounds or hundreds of dollars on it, but get something that's decent. I've got a Weber instant read digital meat thermometer. It cost me £70. Always gives me accurate readings. And normally I will cook my steak up to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that when I take it off, carryover cooking is going to get it up to about 132, 133. And at that point, you're perfectly medium rare. But, you know, whatever ideas you have to be able to test it using, you know, there's that trick where you put your thumb and index finger together and it's supposed to be rare and, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's bullshit. It depends very much on the kind of meat that you're using as to whether you can test steak that way. Yes, you know, if you're Gordon Ramsay, you may be going to be able to guess what the temperature is internally. But I've been doing this for a very long time. I stick with a digital read meat thermometer because that gives me accurate numbers always. And then the third tip is a steak butter that you can use, or that normally I would put on my steak right before it comes off. So usually right before that last turn, the last 4-minute turn, I'll give it a brush on one side, turn it over, brush it on the other side, and then it finishes off for that 4 minutes. So what goes into that butter? Crushed garlic, very high quality farm butter. If you can buy it from a farm store, even better. If you can buy one that's got like a little bit of salt in it, great. But you know, very high quality farm butter. I've already mentioned the crushed garlic. Add a little bit of whatever seasoning you used on the steak. Now, what I like to use on steak is 2 things. Firstly is the Heath Riles garlic jalapeno rub. I use that as a base coat. It's quite a fine ground, it's like a fine ground seasoning, so it works really well. And then usually as a secondary seasoning, I use something a little coarser, and I think the Killer Hogs steak rub works really, really well. You can use some of the garlic jalapeno rub in the butter, or you can do the steak rub. Either will work fine. It's just to kind of reinforce that flavor. And then the true secret is that all the masters know. There's a company called Bear and Burton's. They do something called the W sauce. Now, it's a Worcestershire-based sauce. I don't like normal Worcestershire sauce, but this is fucking amazing. And it's very strong, so you don't want to use too much. But I add about a tablespoon's worth into the steak butter right before I go out and brush the steak with it. Do that, my friend, and if you make steak again in the future, people are going to think that you are the absolute fucking, you know. I'm trying to think of the name of a famous chef, and all of a sudden my memory has left me. But people are going to think you're the shit. That's the most important thing. Okay, let's move on to some more music. Funebrarum have announced their first full length in 17 years. 17 years after the release of their Sleep of Morbid Dreams record, the New Jersey death metal purveyors Funebrarum are now all set to unleash their third full-length opus, Beckoning the Void of Eternal Silence. That comes out on May the 29th, 2026, via Pulverized Records. There's the usual Metal Storm laundry list of credits, basically crediting people that no one knows about, rounding out the rest of the article, so we're going to skip over that. But the new single is entitled The Adepts, so let's hear what it sounds like. There is one thing that is letting an otherwise very competent death metal song down massively on this track, and that is those vocals. I don't know what's going on there. Firstly, they are way too buried in the mix. I mean, I don't want, you never want vocals to be so prominent that they completely overpower everything else that's going on in a track. But I mean, I've got very good headphones on, and those vocals are completely buried. Now, they could potentially be completely buried because they also lack any real punch. They're deep, they're guttural, but I mean, deep and guttural is something that a lot of people can do, and a lot of people do a lot better than Daryl Cahan of Funebrarum. What it is lacking is just, I don't know, a bit discernible aggression. I'm trying to find the right kind of phrase to outline what I think is lacking there. I was going to say balls, but I don't think it's that. I just think there's something missing as far as real, in your face aggression is concerned. Now, again, this could also be down to personal taste. As I've said many times before, in my opinion, the premier death metal vocal performance of all time is Glenn Benton on the first Deicide record. That is aggression and anger that is on such an unhinged level that no one has been able to come anywhere close, including Glenn Benton, since the release of that album. Now, I don't expect everybody to sound that way, but yeah, I do expect in death metal that the vocals need to be, deep, guttural, and aggressive. John Gallagher has got deep, guttural, and aggressive vocals, which is partly why Dying Fetus works so well. Yeah, you've got good sounding music. You've got music that has a slightly cavernous, doomy atmosphere, good riffing, performances, from everybody outside of the vocal booth, very solid. But those vocals just don't do it for me. So it's not going to get a thumbs down, but it's not going to get anything else from me either. Anything other than indifference. Two bits of news that I wanted to talk about very quickly that I'm very excited about. Firstly, Crowbar have confirmed that they are working on new material. Apparently, they've got a new album scheduled for a 2027 or 2028 release, which is it's a distance away. But Kirk is very busy, not only touring with Crowbar, but obviously he's going to be very busy once the new Down album comes out. That will, of course, be the follow-up to 2022's Zero and Below, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then the Amenta have reunited with their original vocalist. Now, there's actually some more Amenta news I'll touch on in just a second. But firstly, just talking about them reuniting with their original vocalist, it says here, Australian industrial death metal band The Amenta have announced that they have reunited with their original vocalist, Mark Cassium 137 Bevan, who last performed on the group's debut album, Ocassus. Anybody who's heard any of the interviews that I've done with The Amenta will potentially have, or you will potentially recall, what I had mentioned to Tim when I had him, Tim from The Amenta, when I had him on the show the first time. One of the very first reviews that I ever wrote was for The Amenta's debut record. I wrote that review for Chronicles of Chaos, gave it a 10 out of 10. I still think Ocassus is an absolutely masterful album. And, they are a band that have continued to be masterful on every successive record. But having Mark Bevan back, I think, is very exciting. I don't know what that means for them from a musical perspective or a future direction perspective. But it's certainly going to be cool to hear some of those Ocassus songs being redone live. And turns out they've got just the man to do it, because they have also recruited the great Matt Wilcock, who I mentioned earlier had contributed the solo to that HoloLens single. But Matt Wilcock, of course, from Werewolves, Antichrist Imperium, Shotgun Mistress, Abremelin, formerly of Akakoka. I mean, one of the most talented and expert guitarists on the face of the earth, now joining the band. Principally, as I understand it, for these 4 shows that they're going to be doing next month in Australia to support Ulcerate. But who knows what happens after that. As luck would have it, I actually spoke to Sam Bean, and you'll hear that on next week's episode, in quite a lot of detail about the Amenta and about how they work internally and his thoughts on his bandmate joining the Amenta. He's got some very interesting insights because, of course, he played bass, I think just did live bass for them, but played bass for them for a period of time. So he knows the guys and he knows how they work internally. And he had some really interesting views. None of it which was massively surprising, but he had a very interesting perspective on it. But either way, great news. And if you haven't heard Ocassus, I still think that it is a 10 out of 10 record. It's fucking brilliant. One of the most overlooked debuts, I think, maybe in the last 30 years. It is just hard hitting. It sounds original. It's a lot more. It veers a lot more towards traditional extreme music than subsequent Amenta releases. But if you listen to this podcast and you've not discovered that yet, you need to do yourself a favor and change that right quick. Okay, on to another track. Defiled have got a new album coming out. Tokyo-based death metal band Defiled have unveiled the lead single from their 9th studio album, Altered State. It comes out on June the 12th via Season of Mist. Check out the music video for Portal below. Whenever I have to force myself to stop a song, that's usually a good sign. It's a weird experience hearing that for the first time, because there's a part of me that wants to pick it apart and go, yeah, there's bits here that sound like it comes off a fucking demo. But all of that somehow just kind of seems to mean nothing in the face of the fact that the way they have executed that very basic death metal song is just so goddamn enjoyable. I couldn't get enough of it. I mean, they are very talented. I think Shinichiro Hamada, the vocalist, sounds fucking great. He possesses all the qualities that I would want from a death metal vocalist that were significantly absent in that Funebrarum song. He sounds aggressive. He sounds pissed off. There's a stronger degree of enunciation in what he's singing. And then, of course, the production of his voice relative to the rest of the instruments in that song, that also works a lot better. Their drummer, Keisuke Hamada, and apologies to everybody in Japan if I'm wrecking any pronunciations. Yeah, I am trying my best. I made the vow at the beginning of the year that I was going to do better when it came to pronunciation. So I hope that's at least noticed. But yeah, Keisuke Hamada sounds like a fucking great drummer. And as I said, as much as the song is, there's bits of it that just sounds genuinely, and I don't mean this to be horrible or to be nasty or anything, but there's bits of the song that just sounds fucking amateurish, but for some reason it all just works. So I really enjoy it. I think it gets a thumbs up for me. I will say this about Defiled: they unfortunately won't carry away the they won't carry away the approval of our friends over on the Is It Sketch subreddit, nor the RABM subreddit, because for them, any band that has any kind of association with Season of Mist, post the fact that Season of Mist release Destroyer 666 records, basically all of them are condemned forever after as a result of that. So, Defiled, you may not be embraced by the RABM communists, but you're certainly getting embraced by yours truly over here on Into the Necrosphere. And that, of course, is way more important. Mork are putting out a new album in June. Norwegian black metal band Mork have released an official music video for Oderlacht. That marks the first single to be taken from the upcoming album Monolith, due on Peaceful Records on June the 19th. The album was mixed by Borger Finstad at Top Room Studio, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to fucking listen to or read through that. What we will read is Thomas Erickson's comments. He says the album is a stark monument to the unrelenting brutality of reality. The monolith booms above us, immovable, indifferent, eternal. Its crushing presence bears down on the spirit, suffocating hope and testing the limits of endurance. It's an experience carved in stone, unyielding. Now, earlier on in the news rant, I was talking about Archaic Oath and about how if you're going to lean in heavily into your influences, you at least need to do something to make yourself stand out. Mork have always done that. And I would say this is probably the most I've enjoyed a piece of music by Mork since 2021's Kathedralen. I mean, this really is fucking excellent. The command of melody, the aggression in Thomas's voice, I think just everything here works. The production sounds really, really cool. It sounds quintessentially Norwegian, but there is definitely a slightly more acidic edge to it. It sounds like Thomas is genuinely more pissed off than he's been on a lot of previous Mork releases, maybe any previous Mork release. And there is also something that is very creative about that riff. So love it. Across the board, I think that is fucking excellent. That gets a thumbs up from me without a shadow of a doubt. And like I've said before, there's a lot of people that you'll see online that act as though Norway isn't as essential when it comes to black metal as it used to be. Like Norway isn't the place where the scene is at its strongest. And I strongly beg to differ. I think between the newer bands as well as the old guards still producing excellent music, I think Norway is as strong as it's ever been. And Mork is a fucking absolutely fantastic ambassador for the Norwegian black metal scene. All right, let's do another question before we move on to anything else. We've got one from Bizarre Cult. Did you like the Slow Horses series? The answer is no, I didn't. I did try and watch it. I know that it is critically acclaimed, but my personal view is I managed to get through 3 episodes and I said no more. So I just don't like it. It's got that same quality that I detest about so much modern television and so much modern filmmaking, which is the entire cast looks like it was put together in a focus group where they said, well, we want representation from this particular demographic, and we want to make sure that there's somebody from this particular subclass of society also represented in it. And so every single character just feels inauthentic as a result. And that, to me, is where the problems begin with that show, even though you've got Gary Oldman in it, and he's a fantastic actor, one of the very best to ever do it. I just couldn't find myself. I just couldn't bring myself to like it. What I can do, though, is I can give you a top tip, and I'll talk about music in just a second, or music that I'm into at the moment in just a second. But here's a top tip when it comes to television and film. I massively misjudged the Michael Mann Miami Vice movie that came out in 2006. When I first saw that, I thought it was complete and utter crap. And I rewatched it last night, totally on a whim. It's fucking excellent. Now, it could very well be that when I first saw it, I was just watching it on a normal television, didn't have the surround sound, the home theater and all that jazz. And I remembered one thing that I particularly disliked about it on first watch through was for some reason, the sound just didn't really sit well for me. You couldn't hear what the actors were saying. On my setup here, of course, that's totally different. I could hear very clearly what both Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx were saying, and their acting was excellent. The movie itself was great. I mentioned to my wife that it could be that it's because, there isn't really anything decent coming out from an action movie perspective at the moment, not in my opinion anyway. So maybe I've just been so beaten down by the many, many rounds of disappointment I've experienced trying to watch something that has been released recently. But I thought it was very good, and I would strongly recommend you going back and checking it out if, like me, you wrote it off at first viewing. But anyway, going on to music, this week really has been all about that Ultha record. I've listened to it in the build-up to getting this episode recorded, but I really do think it is extraordinary. A Light So Dim, just in case you didn't pick it up when I mentioned it previously. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because, I was trying my very best to be subtle during my conversation with Ralph. But as you may have detected, if you paid close attention, I think that it's a bit special. But then I've also been lucky enough to get the full promo for the new Aversio Humanitatis album this week. And I will tell you this. It is a fucking masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. I reached out to Simon, who I've had on the podcast previously, and told him that we're going to have to get him on the podcast around the release of this new record, because it's too good of an album for people to not pay attention to it. It comes out on April the 24th. It's called To Become the Endless Static. It is fucking absolutely brilliant. It is a top 5 contender, and I know there's a new single out, so we'll listen to a quick bit of that new single quickly, just to in case you weren't convinced by the first one, maybe you'll be convinced by the second. If you're not, I feel sorry for you, but yeah, the whole thing from start to finish is absolutely masterful. Tier 1 black metal. If you like any of the stuff that Aversio Humanitatis did previously, and I was a very, very big fan of Behold the Silent Dwellers, their 2020 record. I was a very big fan of Abandonment Ritual, which they put out in 2011. They're Longing for the Untold EP from 2017. That is also great. But fucking hell, this new record is something else entirely. It is such a leap forward for them. And that brings me to this new single, Blackened Mold Marrow. It says here is the second glimpse into Aversio Humanitatis' upcoming long player To Become the Endless Static. Give this 2 minutes and you drop me a line in the comment box and tell me what you think. Beyond top notch. Much like the first single, there is absolutely no question in my mind that is beyond top notch. Absolutely fucking brilliant. Phenomenal atmosphere. Great riffing. It sounds pissed off. It sounds aggressive. It sounds cold, harsh, unique. Everything that is fucking great about modern black metal is wrapped up in that band. This is a top 5 contender for 2026. There is no doubt about that. It is going to be an extraordinary year if something displaces this release in the top 5 of albums that came out in the last. When we get to the end of the year, when the tallying up gets done, it's going to be incredible if something manages to displace this in the top 5. Absolutely fucking brilliant. Like I said, I would love to hear what you guys all think. But I was excited when this was announced. I'm even more excited now that I've actually heard what the whole thing sounds like. All right. Actually, one other thing I should say just before I move on to another song. The other promo that I've been listening to a lot, and usually I don't really check out promos. I wait for the album's release, but I have made an exception for Aversio Humanitatis and then also for Immolation. I've got that Descent promo, the new album from Nuclear Blast, and it is fucking brilliant. I'll talk a bit more about that in the Swirly of the week, so stay tuned. I've got some choice words for somebody who wanted to tell me that the album sucks when he clearly hasn't heard it. Anyway, moving on. Ingested have dropped a new single. It features Dying Fetus frontman John Gallagher. Now, again, normally I would give Ingested a skip. They're not a band that has really been able to impress me all that much. But it's got John Gallagher. How could I, especially after I spoke about him earlier, how could I not listen to the song? It says, yeah, UK brutal death metal / deathcore outfit Ingested have released their new single, Watch You Fold, ahead of their forthcoming album, Denigration. It's set for release on May the 8th via Metal Blade Records. The track features guest vocals from John Gallagher, frontman and founding member of Dying Fetus. Got to tell you, as much as I hate deathcore, I don't hate that. And it may very well be because, as the band themselves say, yeah, the music is a deliberate nod to that mid-2000s unique leader school of blasting brutal death metal, fused with Sean's melodic, brooding sense of atmosphere. I actually think it works really well. John Gallagher sounds great, as you'd expect that he would. The production is cool. It's aggressive. It's less of the all show no go style of aggression that, in my view, is the vast majority of the scene, and it's more something that I think is actually convincingly angry. Yeah, thumbs up to these guys. It is a shame that this record, based on what I've just heard now, has to be released under the cloud left behind by their now former vocalist, Josh Davies. For anybody that is not aware, there are a number of very disturbing allegations that have been leveled the way of this brick. Apparently, he has tried to take advantage of young ladies whilst they were intoxicated, contacted them while they were underage, just disturbing stuff, which if it does turn out to be proven true, I mean, I certainly hope that somebody takes a claw hammer to his testicles. I don't know what's going on in the deathcore scene, to be honest with you, because a couple of years ago, I was mocking Duncan Bentley from Vulvodynia for similar allegations. And I know there's also CJ McCreary, who's a complete and utter septic, and there's an ongoing case around him. Again, nothing proven yet. No one's been officially found guilty, and I do believe people deserve the benefit of the doubt. But in many of these cases, the evidence is relatively overwhelming. So if indeed any of it is proven true, there's only one way to deal with that. No question about it. Okay, we're going to check out two more tracks, and then we're going to wrap up with a swirly. Shane Embury from Napalm Death has announced his debut solo album. It says here, Dissonance Productions have announced the release of Bridge to Resolution, the debut solo album by legendary Napalm Death bassist and songwriter Shane Embury. It is going to be released on CD and vinyl on June the 5th. They've put out a first single. The single is entitled Spasm Prayer. Let's hear what it sounds like. So there's an awful lot of people that are commenting about this, saying that this is not what they expected to hear from Shane Embury. I happen to feel very differently. I spoke to him off air when he was on the podcast the first and only time, I should say, about, you know, whether or not he might do something like this, given how much of a fan he is of bands like Killing Joke. And, you know, he did say that he had a few ideas knocking about. So I'm glad to hear that it's finally got some legs and that we're going to get a full-length record. I think that sounds really, really good. I will say one thing I wasn't expecting was there is something about those guitars that remind me not necessarily of Geordie from Killing Joke, but of Edge from U2. Listen very carefully in that verse. There is a touch of, I don't know whether he's called Edge or The Edge. I don't really give a fuck. But The Edge, let's say he's The Edge from U2. Yeah, there's definitely something in there that sounds reminiscent of early U2. Definitely, obviously, a very, very distinct Killing Joke influence. And I will give Shane this. He's a hell of a vocalist. Now, I've heard him on Kronos. I mean, I think he did some of the backing vocals on the Kronos record. He has also done vocals, here and there on Napalm Death. But taking center stage, being the voice that leads the song in its entirety, I've not heard that before. Certainly not that I can remember. And I think he does a very good job of it. So this is going to be a record that I don't think will be for everybody, but I'm certainly quite excited about it. And Shane, he knows anytime he wants to be back on Into the Necrosphere, he's got an open invite. The one thing amongst several things that I was sad about missing, not going to Inferno this year, was getting to see the Shane Embury career talk that he did at the Inferno Forum. I've said this many times before, and I will reiterate it for anybody who's new to the podcast or listening to the News Rant for the very first time. I genuinely do believe that Shane Embury will be remembered as one of the most important songwriters in the history of extreme music. There's no question about that in my mind. He's one of the most creative, one of the most consistent, and he is an extraordinarily humble guy when you speak to him. If you think about the body of work that this man has already amassed, and he is now 58, so he's got a couple more years ahead of him. But the body of work he's built up since he first joined the scene up to now, it's just absolutely extraordinary. And the fact that he can still be putting out album after album of just great top-tier music that sounds true to his roots, true to his convictions, but also, sounds consistently creative, unique, and interesting. I think it's fucking extraordinary. I really do. So that guy's got, he will forever be one of my musical heroes, and he will always have my respect. He's an incredible musician and an incredible guy. And I don't want to sound like I've got a crush or anything like that, so I'll stop there. One more question. I have one, and this is a hi-fi related question. Dave B from Australia asks, I'm hoping you could provide a little bit of hi-fi advice. Can you recommend a new CD player that isn't going to cost an arm and a leg? It's going to be connected into a Sonos 5 speaker and integrated into that system around the house. So it doesn't need to be super premium at all, but I want something that will be reliable and hassle-free. Any recommendations would be greatly appreciated. I will say to him, I actually messaged him about this offline, but I thought that it would potentially be relevant or of value to somebody listening to the News Rant. My recommendation to him, my recommendation to all of you, is the Marantz CD 6007 CD player. You can pick them up for £350 new. You're in the UK. If you go on eBay, I'm pretty confident you're going to be able to pick one up. If you time it right, you might be able to get one for about £200, probably $250, maybe $300. But it is a fantastic, high quality, budget friendly CD player. It has a great DAC set. It sounds fucking cool, even if you've got a high end system. It doesn't take up a huge amount of space. And Marantz, in my view, is a great value for money, brand when it comes to anything and everything home theater or hi-fi. The other one that I would recommend you check out as well is if you absolutely hate Marantz, another one you can check out is the Rotel CD11. So again, brand new. They are the CD11 MK2 is £549. I'd be surprised if you couldn't find that for under $400 on eBay. But again, Rotel, very high quality brand that puts out products that are affordable, but will last you for a very, very long time. And that CD11 MK2, I think, is right up there with some of the very best, entry level or budget products that they've released. And by the way, if you guys ever want to know anything more about Hi-Fi, if you have any other questions, you can hit me up on intothenecrosphere.com. You can submit it as a question via the socials, specifically for the news rant, or if you want me to keep it private. If you want your business affairs kept private, you can do that too. But I'm always happy to talk to people about Hi-Fi anytime they ask. Okay, Sepultura are dropping a new track called Beyond the Dream. Now, we heard that previous single that they put out off this Swan Song EP of theirs, and neither myself nor Matt Prizzo, who was listening to it with me at the time, was impressed. But it says here, Brazilian death thrash metal legends Sepultura have released Beyond the Dream as the second single from their recently announced upcoming EP, The Cloud of Unknowing. That EP comes out on April the 24th via Nuclear Blast, and the band is going on one last world tour to promote it. Whenever a song like this is released, you can always rely on the commenters on Metal Storm to provide you with an absolute comedy gem. And this time round, we've got somebody named Thrice who says, imagine delaying your retirement plans just to insist you've still got some fire left in the tank, only to release this fossilized turd of a song, which I think is fucking brilliant. There are 4 tracks on this Cloud of Unknowing EP. The Place was the first single. That's the final song on the album. And again, that got a thumbs down. The one we just listened to, Beyond the Dreams, that's track number 2, which means that you've got track 1 and track 3 to salvage what so far is sounding distinctly underwhelming. Like the worst possible way for a band like Sepultura to say goodbye. As one of my favorite YouTubers and biggest guilty pleasures would say, it's not looking good, bruv. If you had tapped somebody on the shoulder back in 1991, or, even worse, back around the time that Schizophrenia was released, and you said that when Sepultura call it a day, this is what it's going to sound like, I think you probably have gotten beaten up. Such was the passion for that band that they would have taken it as a personal affront that you could dare suggest that a band that had so much fire in the belly would go out on such a damp squib. And this is coming from somebody who has been I've been an advocate for the Derek Green era of Sepultura for the entirety of the podcast. Like, I've always been pretty consistent that, and I'll reiterate it again in case anybody has missed it, If they had started a different band and they didn't call it Sepultura, I think people would have taken to it a lot more than they did. And I think there are some very, very good songs, actually some very good albums in that Derek Green era of Sepultura. It's not Sepultura, and it shouldn't have been called Sepultura, and the band would have been way better served had they just taken the punch up front and gone on under a different name. But that being said, you still have to divorce the two concepts and say there are songs on The Mediator Between the Head and the Hands Must Be the Heart, as an example, that are fucking great. There are songs on Nation that are excellent. There are songs on Kairos that are excellent. This, though, I don't care how big of a fucking defender of the Derek Green era of Sepultura you are. This is just fucking dull. This is inside voice level stuff. Like, if you were going to come up with a song like this, do it as solo material. Do it as something completely different, but this has nothing to do with Sepultura, and it is just not the way to say goodbye to a band who wields so much influence and, you know, has, at the very least for the first 5-6 records of their discography, commands so much respect. This, to me, is this is a fucking insult to the band's legacy, quite frankly. Coming from guys who I expected way, way more from. Yes, I'm sick and tired of hearing about how Max Cavalera is horrible and how, you know, they don't care about the reunion, only to then bring it up in yet another interview. I mean, you know, the standard Andreas Kisser interview has become excruciatingly dull because it's always about the same old shit. But he's still a fucking great guitarist. He always struck me as you know, besides the tedium of his interviews, he always struck me as a good dude. Same with Derek. And I'm sure they are good dudes. But this is fucking misguided trash. That's the best way to, that's the most charitable thing I can call it. Misguided trash. So if ever you wanted people to process the fact that you're no longer going to be around Sepultura, if you wanted people to not be especially sad about it, you've definitely helped, or you've gone a long way towards achieving that, because no one is going to give a fuck about you not making music anymore if this is the way that you're going to say goodbye. Now, that is probably as acerbic a note as I need to launch into a short, swift, but deservedly scathing Swirly of the Week. Last week on the show, as most of you will be aware, I had the legendary Robert Wigner of Immolation on. If you've not yet listened to that conversation, do yourself a favor and check it out as soon as you're done with this one. It was, from my perspective, a great conversation. Everybody who watched it, all of the members of the Legion seemed to thoroughly enjoy it. And from my perspective, it was also a big tick in the box, because Bob had been somebody that I had as a wish list guest for really as long as the podcast has been going. So being able to finally do it and have the kind of conversation that we did, that was immensely satisfying to me. But as we all know, with the roses must come the thorns, and nothing attracts low-grade nonsense quite like a higher profile guest. So it came to bear, my friends, that the human hemorrhoid in question, who slithered out of the woodwork to befoul the comment section of the YouTube version of episode 300 with his presence, goes by the name of Ryan Paul, a man who, to his 25 YouTube subscribers, describes himself as an amateur musician, professional comedian, and a photographer. And I will be fair to him, I checked out some of his videos. He seems like, on the evidence of what he has uploaded there, to be a very capable guitarist. What he neglected to mention, however, is that he is also a world-class poser. Now, why do I say that? Well, Ryan decided to weigh in on the Robert Wigner episode with the following insightful critique, and I quote, "The new album sucks, just like everything after Unholy Cult." Now, look, people are, of course, entitled to their opinions. Not everybody has to share my taste, and I might find it borderline incomprehensible that someone doesn't enjoy Immolation, but, you know, I can still chalk it up to a difference of opinion. Except for one small detail. The new Immolation album only gets released on April the 10th. So unless Ryan has got some sort of divine premonition or he's sitting on an advanced promo, which, if I'm perfectly honest with you, seems very unlikely to me, because publicly trashing an album before it's been released is probably the quickest way to guarantee you get blacklisted by a label. So it's not something that tends to happen. Either he has the promo and he's just being reckless, or he's just talking absolute bullshit. So, of course, I responded to him and I asked him when he might have had occasion to hear the full new record. And like the true champion and winner at life that he is, he immediately deleted the comment and vanished into the ether. Now, unfortunately for Ryan, quietly slithering away isn't going to spare him from the consequences of his actions. So this week's corrective action is as follows. We're starting off with a hanging wedgie. From there, we're following it up with a double dunk in the porcelain bowl of correction in the hopes that Ryan has learned his lesson. And that, my friends, is the Swirly of the Week. My friends, as I wrap up this week's episode, I wanted to take a moment to express my condolences to the friends, the family, and the loved ones of Bo Luders, the guitarist for Harm's Way, the co-host of the Hard Law podcast. As many of you will be aware, he sadly passed away on April the 2nd. Now, there hasn't been very much shared publicly about the circumstances surrounding his passing, but the Hard Law podcast, their statement when they shared it, included a call for anybody suffering from depression to reach out to a friend. They also included the number to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So it's reasonable, therefore, to assume that Bo may have chosen to end his life by his own hand, which at the age of 38 is, to me, just extraordinarily tragic. Now, I never had the chance to meet Bo personally, but I've seen enough of his interviews and appearances to know that he left an impression, or a very positive impression behind. He certainly seems to have been very widely respected, deeply loved in the metal and hardcore scenes. And I think anybody who looks at some of the things or some of the statements that have come out subsequent to this really tragic news, everybody seems to rate him as a great friend, a great musician, and by all accounts, a genuinely good man. I think, having watched some of his interviews and having watched podcast appearances with him, I think the one thing that it leaves me thinking is you never know what's going on beneath the surface of what somebody is putting out in public. I mean, he certainly didn't seem to me like someone who was struggling with depression, but clearly, something very, very serious was going on behind the scenes, serious enough to end up in the way that it has ended up. And I'm not here to preach to anybody or give advice where it isn't wanted. But if you are listening to this and you're struggling, if things are feeling heavy, if you're overwhelmed, if you feel like there's no way forward, remember these three words. If you take nothing else away from this episode, just remember these three words: control the controllable. I know I've said that many times before on the show, and I keep repeating it because it is something that helped me massively when I was at my absolute lowest. And I would say, I think, had I not adopted that mantra to the absolute letter and lived by it consciously, I think my life would have taken a much darker and a much more destructive turn than it ended up taking in 2016. So, if you need help, reach out, talk to somebody. You don't have to carry this on your own. Someone somewhere is willing to listen to you. And if you don't have anybody else, reach out to somebody in the Legion. Reach out to somebody in the community. You can even reach out to me. But honestly, it's just so sad to me to see somebody leave this earth well before they naturally should have gone. And as I said, I know there's probably people listening to this right now who might be going through some really heavy stuff of their own. Hopefully what I've said is helpful. And again, just my very sincere condolences to anybody who is suffering from this really, really tragic loss. So on that note, my friends, I want to thank every single person who's listened all the way through to the very end of the podcast. You, the Legion, and your support really mean an awful lot to me. I will be back next week. My guest is going to be Sam Bean from Werewolves. And funnily enough, that conversation turned out to be one that probably you wouldn't associate this with a werewolves conversation, but it turned out to be really inspiring. And we spoke about a lot of very deep, manly stuff. So make sure you are around next week for that one. In the meantime, whatever it is that you are doing and wherever it is that you are heading, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.